Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to this week's episode of Not D&D, brought to you by EM World. As always, I'm your host, Jessica, and this week we have Jason Hardy here to talk to us about Frostpunk. Jason, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to have you on to talk about Frostpunk. But before I talk about that, I would like to talk a little bit about you, because people that are into their tabletop RPGs may recognize your name from a few places. But those that don't, could you give a little overview of what you do at Catalyst Game Labs and kind of what you've been involved in tabletop RPGs?
So I am the creative director of the RPG division, which just formed a year and a half ago. But before that, I spent a long time being the Shadowrun line developer at Catalyst. Mm-hmm. So I did lots and lots and lots of Shadowrun books, 5th edition, 6th edition, and on and on. Then we made the RPG division because we had more role-playing games that were going to be coming out, and we wanted to be able to handle them, and I wanted to be able to try some different things because I've done Shadowrun a long time. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of role-playing people, I was involved in writing stuff for D20 back in whenever D20 boom was in the early aughties. Mm-hmm. So I've been working in the field for about 20 years.
Wow. So, do you have any advice for people that are wanting to get into working in tabletop games? Because I know it can be quite a hard industry to break into. Do you have any kind of tips or recommendations?
I mean, it's fairly simple on the basics. Is when you're asked to do something, do it the way you're asked and follow through and hit deadlines. And if someone says this is what a submission should look like, make sure the submission looks like that. But also work on being clear in your writing. Work on expressing yourself in your writing, in your art, whatever it is. So work on putting that piece of yourself that's going to make it different and that's going to make it special so that it comes out and it doesn't just sound like what anyone else is doing. Make it your own.
Yeah, I like that. That's great advice. Thank you. So obviously you've had a long career in tabletop games, but obviously that started with a passion and as a hobby for you, I'm assuming. So do you remember the first game that you played, the first tabletop role-playing experience you had?
It's sadly bland that it was Dungeons and Dragons. I had a friend when I was, 10 or 12 years old, and he said, I found this game, and we can play that we're knights and wizards and fight monsters, and it never ends. And I was like, okay, let's do that. How do you win? You don't win. You just keep fighting. Okay, let's play.
And then that escalated into a career and everything where we are today.
Yeah, I always wanted to be involved in just telling stories somehow. Always wanted to write, and the fact that I could write and also do role-playing games turned out to work out really well.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, so be careful watching. If you're really into your role-playing games, you may end up with a career in it as well. So it could happen to you too.
That's kind of like Jumanji.
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, let's segue into talking, speaking of Jumanji and kind of post-apocalyptic or potentially apocalyptic situations, let's segue into talking about Frostpunk. So Frostpunk is based on the video game, obviously, but if people aren't familiar with the video game and don't know the world, could you give us an intro into the setting and what the game is, what we're going to be walking into?
Sure. So it's a society building and society survival game, and the basic premise is in the later part of the 19th century, winter never went away, and then there was a great frost, and winter came with a vengeance, and the whole world froze. And civilization was not ready for that, so many civilizations collapsed. What people could migrated up to the north, and they started to build cities around large steam generators. And that's how they had to survive. You had to have the coal to provide the steam. You needed to have wood to build your houses and buildings. You needed to have steel also. And of course, you needed food. So the whole premise of the game is how can you build a city around the steam generator and survive everything that's coming your way when a warm day is about minus 40 degrees. And the game is really good at throwing curveballs at you. It's not just, how do you survive the cold, but what happens when refugees come to your city? What happens when sick people come to your city? What happens when you have different shortages or quarrels? How do you balance all the needs of everyone in your city to try to make it survive? And it really makes you think through all the dynamics of what a city needs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm a big fan of video games like this, so I love the kind of resource management, the strategy side of it. I'm wondering how you decide to approach it, because obviously it's a video game. How do you translate that into a role-playing game? Because it's a different type of gaming experience.
Yeah, you have more control in the computer game because you are the lord of the city. You can assign everyone where they need to go, and you can always say, you go get wood, you go get food, and you can make it all happen. In an RPG, that's not how you're going to make it work, but it translates pretty decently in that all the players in the game can take the roles in the city. So they are going to the people who are doing the critical functions. Maybe they're a leader in the city. Maybe they're the beacon master who is up in the big balloon watching out for dangers. Maybe they're exploring or going looking for other resources. Maybe they're a faith keeper who is trying to keep inspiring the people and keep security in the city. Or maybe they're with order and being someone to guard the prison. It can be really endless, the roles that you could do in the game, but you're going to take some role in the city of someone who's trying to help it survive, because that's what everyone has to do. They have to take a role to make the city work. And then as your team, you're going to all be involved in trying to make the city survive and keep its hope up and not collapse into discontent and disorder.
Well, fingers crossed that all works out. I guess if you're a fan of the digital game, you're gonna see lots of things that you recognize, and like the art style and things looks very similar to the game. So was it made? Are you a fan of the game as well? Was it made by people who enjoy the digital game?
100% it is made by people who own the digital game. We have had in meetings of people within Catalyst competitions for who has the most hours played of Frostpunk. I keep forgetting to check, so I don't know how many hours I have. It's high, but other people are well into the hundreds or 500 hours. So we are big fans of the game. It's a gorgeous game, and I love the immersiveness of it. So yeah, everyone who worked on it has played it and really enjoyed the game.
Fabulous. And I think that shows through in some of the characters that you were mentioning are in the game. So people that play will kind of recognize some of those elements. But what does character creation look like? Because it's using the dice core system. So yeah, how do we make a character? If we were going to sit down and play, what does that look like?
So character creation is really easy. You have 6 attributes, and you're told, here's 6 dice that you're going to assign to the attributes. And so, forgive me if I get the exact numbers wrong, but you have 3 D6s, a D8, and a D10, or 2 D8s and a D10 that you'll assign to those attributes.
Okay.
And then you will pick out a group of about 6 skills, and there's a fairly short skill list. And then just pick out some gear, and basically you're ready to go. There are a few, flavor things you're going to put in. Your character will have a knack, something that they do especially well that helps flesh them out, and just some other traits about how your character will react in a difficult situation. But really, once you assign dice to the attributes and the skills, and then do a few derived stats, you're ready to go. It goes pretty quick. I had to do about 20 NPCs for the book not too long ago, and it was not as long as when I had to do 20 Shadowrun NPCs.
I'll bet.
That's a week of work.
I imagine. Well, and that leads us nicely to talk about complexity. So what sort of level of complexity or crunch would you say the game has? So
we've been describing it as medium weight. So it's certainly not to the crunchiness of something like Shadowrun, or I would say Dungeons and Dragons. But it's not fully narrative like some of the more story-based system. There are some tactical options, and your decisions within the game are going to be rewarded mechanically with better dice rolls and improvements, but it is still built to move quickly so that the story doesn't slow down just so you can calculate modifiers and dice rolls and all that. So you can be rewarded for your decisions, but not have the story get interrupted too much.
Fab. So if somebody's only played Dungeons and Dragons before, like 5th edition, coming to this, they're not going to be overwhelmed with the rules, it sounds like. So
no, I would say you're not. If you know 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to be fine.
Fantastic. So talking a bit more about the mechanics there. So what is the core mechanic behind the dice core system?
So it's always rolling 3 dice. It's just about how you make that pool. Usually you take a skill. So like if I'm going to be involved in a fight, I might take the close combat skill, and I have a die assigned to that. And then there's a linked attribute. So that would be agility. I take my agility die, and then you get a 3rd die based on the complexity of your action. Usually it's a simple action, which is a D8. A complex action would be a D6. Take those 3 dice, roll them, add them together, and you're either trying to beat a threshold or you're trying to beat what someone else rolled. But what you will get throughout the game are upgrades and downgrades to your dice.
Mhm.
So maybe you're wounded, so you might have to take a downgrade to 1 die. So that might make a D8 become a D6. Or you make a really good plan and carry it out well. So the game master decides to give you an upgrade. So a D8 might become a D10. And so you just change those dice, roll them, and move on your way.
Beautiful. Sounds reasonably simple. It's a relatively new system, is that right? Because I've heard about it for a few months. So how new is this, the kind of game system?
These will be the 2 games that we kickstarted recently for the division will be the first 2 to have it. We did a Voltron Kickstarter last fall, and then the Frostpunk one just a few months ago. So those will be the first 2 out of the gate to use the dice core system. We're also working on a short Kung Fu Panda RPG that'll have a modified version of it.
Fantastic. That sounds great. And I noticed there's no D20 here. It's missing from the lineup. Why was that? Is that just because it made it too much of a swing and the maths didn't work out, or do we just hate D20s?
Exactly. I mean, it is extra powerful. No, we love D20s. They're awesome. I mean, because we are a bunch of nerds here at Catalyst. The whole origin of this system was I brought in a spreadsheet to my coworker Randall and said, look at these probabilities when you roll 3 dice together. Isn't this awesome? And he's like, yeah. And we geeked out over a spreadsheet at Gen Con because that's what you do when you work for a game company.
Yeah.
But then we experimented adding the D20 in, and it does kind of jump up the power. But that works for Voltron. So like Voltron, there are some special circumstances where you do get a D20. When you form Voltron, you get a few limited D20 uses. But Frostpunk isn't that sort of game. There aren't, superpowers or anything like that in Frostpunk. So Frostpunk stays with D12.
That makes sense. I mean, Frostpunk, the setting does feel more kind of gritty and grounded and like you're working hard to just get by and kind of survive. So how do the kind of mechanics help support the theme and the feel in the game? Like, so if I'm running the game, how does it support me in creating that environment?
So I think it helps that you're going to be good at something right out of the gate, but you're never going to be exceptional. I mean, that sounds a little discouraging, but you're not going to be super powered. Frostpunk isn't a super powered game. So you're going to be able to accomplish things immediately, but you're going to have to keep working to get better at them. And you really are going to have to rely on your team. There's a lot of good ways that the other members of your team can help, both giving you advantages to make sure you have upgrades, or sometimes they can assist you on the test. And they're going to have different skills and attributes than you do. And so they're going to do things well that you don't. And so working together and making sure you're all part of the solution you're trying to devise will be really important rather than anyone just freelancing. And I think that fits in with the computer game really well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was looking through, when I was reading through kind of the details of the game and the crowdfunding campaign, the Kickstarter campaign, the links are in the show notes as well. So if you missed it, there'll be options for late pledges, I'm sure, coming through soon on that link. But it looked like it was designed for kind of campaign play because you're managing this city. So I imagine throughout a campaign, things are going to change and you'll kind of almost build a relationship with the city itself. It's almost like your own unique thing for each campaign. But what sort of stories will we be telling when we sit down to play? Like what sort of adventures will we be having in Frostpunk?
So there's a whole range that you can have. There can be exploration stories where you go out into the Frostland and try to see who else is out there, what resources you can get. There are just politics within the city that you have as, one crisis comes and another crisis. For example, the scenario in the Quick Start rules that came out with the Kickstarter is that a new prosthetics factory has opened in the city, and then it gets a bomb threat. So someone threatens to blow it up. So you're asked to investigate where that threat comes from. And of course, since this is Frostpunk, the answer that you discover is not simple. You don't find, oh, it's this bad guy. We'll lock him in jail and everyone's happy and it's fine. It's much more morally complicated than that. And that's going to have repercussions too. So you could start that as a campaign. And once you come up with whatever solution you devise to that problem, and I've run that scenario many times, and I'm really impressed by the creativity of players as they come up with different ways of trying to figure out how to solve the problem that scenario presents. But you're not going to solve it perfectly. There's going to be another problem that comes up. Someone's going to be made upset. Someone's going to ask something of you in order for you to get what you want. So then you're going to have another thing to try to fulfill. And in the computer game, you're always tracking the level of hope in a city, the level of discontent, and then your resources level of food, steel, wood. And that's the same in the RPG. So
Oh,
we're
cool.
planning the game master screen to have sliders that track hope and discontent and food
Nice.
and steel and wood. And then there are mechanics for how people in the city will react to you based on how hopeful they're feeling.
Mhm.
So if the city has high hope, you're going to get extra upgrades. You're going to be able to have the people do more for you. If there's more discontent, people are going to not help you, and there might be random fights breaking out that are going to cause more difficulty for you. So there's mechanics in the book to help you feel the effects of all those changes.
Oh, I love that. That sounds really great. Thinking about some of those scenarios and those, like you say, difficult moral decisions. Obviously, people will create their own stories. People love doing that in the worlds they make. But the book comes with a set of scenarios and things to get you started, or
Yeah, there is a bunch of plot hooks in the book, a whole chapter of just different scenarios to get you moving, and then it also has a guide to some of the major cities in the Frostland so that you can see where you can make your story take place, and each of them have some story elements that you can build off of. For example, if you played the On the Edge downloadable scenario to the first game, that introduces a whole bunch of new cities, each of them that comes with their own fun moral
yeah.
dilemma, like the children's mine, which is
Mhm.
where a bunch of children were left in a coal mine and they're the only ones to mine it. So they mine it. So then
Oh, wow.
what do you do when you encounter a mine that is run by children? Do you take the coal that they dig out because you need it? What do you do about this child labor and just all sorts of dilemmas?
Literal miners, I see. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you have, I mean, that was a great example, but do you have any particular favorite cities or anything? I know you probably don't want to give too many spoilers away, but any particular favorites you have?
I like the big city, so I just,
Mhm.
and that's kind of a plain answer. I like New London because I think it
Mhm.
offers the most possibilities. I spent so much time building that thing and trying to make it survive
Mhm.
that I have some allegiance to it. But I like just how many complications can come from being a part of New London, not only from the citizens within there, but once you start trying to relate to other cities and deal with them, there's just so many stories to build out from.
Mhm. Fantastic. If people want to see the game being played, you've been running an actual play online, which I'll put the link in the show notes to. So obviously that's great if people are fancying running the game, they can watch someone else do it and kind of see what it's all about. But do you have any particular advice for game masters? So if somebody's like, I want to try running this, what particular tips would you give for running a game of Frostpunk?
So the biggest one I think is to make sure the players have space. So
Hmm.
don't be trying to push them in any direction and don't try to make them feel like there's a right answer. Give
Hmm.
them time to talk about whatever dilemma you threw at them. And then, keep listening to where they're really concerned about something and push them on that.
Hmm.
If you look at the actual play that we did, the actual play was a lot of fun because what we
Hmm.
were able to do with that was take a novella that the people at 11-bit had written for their Kickstarter that went at the same time because they offered two books, a book of fiction and a book
Hmm.
of art, and we had parallel Kickstarters going on.
Hmm.
So we took one of their novellas and adapted it into an RPG scenario. And there is a character in that who's part of the city council of the place where the scenario takes place, who is more controlling, domineering than some people in my play group liked.
Hmm.
And so they kind of started pivoting towards we want to be more of a element of freedom in the city and represent like democracy, whereas
Hmm.
this person is more authoritarian, and we want to try to push him out. So I could see that that was a story element they were interested in. So if that's
Hmm.
where they want to play, is how they're going to deal with this element, then keep that guy coming into the story and make sure that they have chances to interact and try to push back because that's where they're interested. So let them go where they want to go and let the
Hmm.
story go where they're pushing it.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think that's great advice for almost that's
Mhm.
for many role-playing games. You could apply that to as well, not just for Frostpunk. So thanks for that.
Yeah, it took
So
me a long time to learn that. Unfortunately, I was a
oh
little too
yeah.
railroady as a young man, but then I realized let the players know where it should go, and it's a lot more fun.
Well, sometimes as a player, a railroad is a nice thing. It's like going on a ride at Disneyland or something. You just get to sit back and enjoy and watch what's going on. Sometimes that's
a
great.
good perspective, yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes you want to get in there and explore. It's play in the sandbox a bit more. Absolutely. So if people have been listening to this and think, Frostpunk sounds great, I need to get me a copy. The crowdfunder has ended. How can people get involved and get a copy of the game?
I imagine we will be opening up for late backs probably after we get the book approved, but you can always follow us on Facebook, the role-playing division of Catalyst Game Labs, so we'll be putting updates there, and of course at our webpage at catalystgamelabs.com. And we will be sending out the book to stores all over as soon as it is done and available, so we'll be keeping updating, and of course there'll be PDFs available on all the major PDF websites too.
Fantastic. That sounds great. Well, thank you very much for talking about Frostpunk with me. I'm really interested in it. I love a post-apocalyptic setting and I love a bit of resource management, so it's exactly my sort of thing. So thanks for talking with me about it. Before you go, I would love to ask you if you have any recommendations for any other tabletop RPGs.
Yeah, I read one recently that is really interesting because it kind of changed or expanded what I thought an RPG could do, and also how it can direct storytelling. It's called Dialect, and it's a game about how languages are lost.
Okay.
And so it guides everyone in the group. It sets up a situation, so you're all in some scenario, and it guides everyone to creating certain words that were going to be part of your common language. And then it has a very clear set of how your story will develop and how your words will be used, and then also how gradually the language slips away as time passes. And when I first heard of it, I thought it would be, I wasn't sure how they were going to pull this off. I thought it would be really difficult to make it concrete, and that would maybe just rely on the creativity of the players to role play this. But it has a really good, clear set of guideposts for how you make the words, and then how the words evolve as you play through the game. And as someone who likes words a lot anyway, I think it's a really interesting way to look at how language develops and how language brings people together, and what's lost when language is lost. So it's a really clever game.
Yeah, Dialects. That's a great recommendation. Thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for coming on, Jason. Thanks for giving it your time, and also for putting Frostpunk out in the world. I'm excited to play it.
My pleasure. I've had so much fun playing this game, and I'm really, it took a long time to get to where we are.
Oh, yeah?
So I'm really excited for people. Yeah, we've been working on this for years. So I'm really excited for people to have in their hands and just to hear what happens when they play with it.
Fantastic. Well, it's great. I can't wait to get my copy. And thank you very much to everyone who has watched and listened. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll be back next week with another indie tabletop RPG to talk to you about. And it's also another post-apocalyptic themed one. So if you've enjoyed this week, maybe you'll enjoy next week too. So see you then. Thanks a lot and bye.